If Arsenal start scoring from open play, then the title race is over. Hello, I'm Lola Katz-Roberts, and welcome to this week's episode of the Goal Difference podcast, where those two now 27-year-old football mad twins talk about, well, football. But the catch is, of course, I support Liverpool, and my lovely, charming, witty, and not so beautiful co-host Scarlett Katz-Roberts supports Arsenal. Scarlett, the Goal Difference turned one yesterday, along with its co-hosts who turned a less glamorous age of 27. How was your day?
It was a good day. I think we should clear up that the goal difference hasn't actually existed for a year. Just the idea for the goal difference was conceived at our last birthday, wasn't it? Let's talk about the weekend quickly because you asked me. And I know you don't want to hear it, but it was a great weekend for Arsenal again. I mean, I don't know if this happened to you, but like the first weekend where things broke for us this season, which was when we beat Newcastle late and you lost to, who did you lose to then? Palace, felt monumental. And now it just feels like business. So everything went well. City lost, you lost. Bournemouth won, as did Tottenham, sadly. But I think it felt monumental because there's now a little bit of daylight at the top of the league. And I say this with the full knowledge that Liverpool were 5 points ahead of us after 5 fixtures and knowing how quickly things can change.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not as raw or in pain as I was the first time this happened. Because just as you kind of get desensitized to the good moments, you also naturally get desensitized to the bad. And I think if there's one thing that I've learned from this season, how winning is habitual, and you can win games by habit and by reflex and by trusting yourself in big moments when other people are panicking. And equally, losing is a habit. Like if you look back on these last four, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, the last four Premier League games in a row that Liverpool have lost, you know, a phrase of you're very fond of, it's a garden of branching paths. There are so many moments within those games where we could have gone on to win the game. We could easily draw the game. So I think that's the thing to take away from what you're saying, which is that being good and winning and taking advantage of rivals' slip-ups is a habit just as much as losing is. Right, we've got a very interesting show to bring you today. So we're going to slip into our regular dynamic in this show, which is unpacking Scarlett's Arsenal, who are flying, and Lola's Liverpool, who are absolutely stalling at the moment. We'll do a quick weekend reaction and then have a good look ahead at those League Cup fixtures, as well as peeking into the cesspit that is football Twitter to see what the latest beef between Arsenal and Liverpool fans on social media is. But before we dive in, we just want to say a huge thank you for all the support on YouTube. You've been flocking to our page in your thousands. And honestly, Scarlett, that was the best birthday present we could have asked for. So please keep the support coming. Hit subscribe, hit like. We can't wait to bring you more Goal Difference content this season. Okay, on with the show. Let's have a look back at the weekend. So I'm going to start with a question that I think you're going to like a lot. And that is, how meaningful do you think last weekend was in the context of the title race?
Well, as we alluded to at the top there, meaningful, but it didn't necessarily feel the most meaningful. I think probably part of that owes itself to the nature of the Arsenal win, which was not pretty, perhaps even the ugliest of this season from us. But I think what it was business. You know, we got the business done. And this was a fixture that we dropped points in last season. It was 2-2. It was towards the back end when we were Champions Leaguing and our eyes weren't fully focused on the league. So the amount that you can kind of compare those two games, I'll leave that up to you. But it was huge, really. It was huge because City dropped points and you dropped points. And once again, we took a step forward that we needed to make. If we'd come away with anything less than a win against Palace at home, I think there would be recriminations, and probably rightly so. But we did it. And I think that has probably been the biggest criticism leveled at Arsenal most consistently, which is when push comes to shove, they haven't done it.
You're so smug, Scarlett. Look, what I would say is, to me, sitting where I sit, I don't feel like the season has got going yet. I think everyone's kind of just sitting and watching and waiting. I can't really quite put my finger on what's going on at City. Meanwhile, Arsenal are racking up the points. So this kind of leads into my next question, which is, I think, now the narrative police have pivoted and it's Arsenal's title to lose, which I'll ask you about in a minute. But Arsenal are, as you say, going about their business and creating a gap. Do you have any kind of lingering fear in the back of your mind of, shit, what happens if Liverpool or City put together a run? Or anyone for that matter. You might as well throw Chelsea, a Bournemouth going to do a Leicester, etc. That's my question to you. What's keeping you awake at night? What's worrying you, if anything?
I mean, all of those things are always a possibility, aren't they? You were worried about Arsenal doing that last season, even when you were miles ahead. I think leading comes with its own set of pressures because it becomes your title to lose, and anything less than winning the title then becomes a catastrophic failure. Although that was kind of where we were at, in terms of the narrative around Arsenal going into this season anyway. Do I feel nervous? I think what we're doing is not massively different to what we've always done. I think it is simply the platonic ideal to some extent of what we've been trying to do. And it's the platonic ideal because things have gone our way a little bit where they didn't before, and because we have slightly different personnel that have enabled us to be a little bit better. So I'm not worried that other teams will be good because I think we will be good. I think the thing that you can't quite put your finger on is all the underlying numbers can tell you everything you need to know. And I don't say that to discredit stats, but what the underlying numbers can't account for is the way in which emotion impacts performance. And, Liverpool had every right to believe that they would be title favourites this season because on paper, they probably had the best starting 11. But that doesn't account for the context around the team changing, which changes your ability to perform at your best level. So I'm not necessarily worried about everyone else. I'm worried about us. I'm worried about whether we can maintain this status quo. But my hunch is, because I've seen evidence of it in the past 3 years, that we can. It is just a question of not getting lost in the pressure and hopefully not losing too many players to injury. We've already lost quite a few, and that's something again that you can't really control when it comes to a title race.
Yeah, look, Arsenal are in the flow state right now. There's no doubt about it. I'm not even watching much of Arsenal at the moment. I'm not watching much of any football because, frankly, it's just too painful. But I do feel that, eventually Arsenal are going to concede a goal and the margin of victory has become narrower in recent weeks. So I'm not saying the spell is lifting. I don't think that it is. And I still think Arsenal aren't going to lose many games. I think actually is an important thing to state. But I do think that there's probably a 0-0 around the corner. And I'll be really interested to see how that group reacts given that emotional context, because, there's trauma for Arsenal around not scoring. For them, it brings back all those terrible memories of not being able to score a goal. And that brings me to a key fact that we cannot ignore, which is that Arsenal are 17th in the Premier League for open play goals. So tell me about that. How do you see that squad reacting if and when a 0-0 or a 1-1 or whatever comes along?
I think we've had a version of that kind of, are you worried about Arsenal scoring a lot of goals from set pieces and not from open play conversation quite a few times. The point I would reiterate about that is, why do we get so many set pieces? Because we play a lot of the game in the opposition third, and because people have to give away fouls against you or corners if you're near their goal. So the logical thing to do as a team that wanted to kind of maximize your output would be, okay, how can we take advantage of the fact that teams are going to sit in against us and turn that frustration and then a broken game into something we can benefit from. And then to kind of come to the broader question about open play threat, I do think, and I think the numbers tell you this generally, that we have been more of a threat from open play this season than last. But it is true, there wasn't much else in the game for us against Palace. Apart from chances from set plays, there wasn't anything for Palace. I think they had one shot on target, if you want to call it that, and that was Eddie Nketiah kind of heading the ball out of David Raya's hands. So does it matter if you're not giving anything else away? But then to kind of speak to the context about open play threats, as much as people have talked about injuries to other teams and betting in new signings and transitions, the fact is Gyökeres has played a lot more football than he otherwise would have. Eze has now had to be the number 10 player, if you want to call it that. We started with Madueke on the right because Saka was missing for half of our season. Saka's now back and Madueke's missing. There's no Havertz, there's no Jesus. You know, like, we're not hanging by a thread because we have a really big squad, but that is a big change to the team that normally functions and produces things. And I think there's only so much change you can absorb in one go as you're experiencing.
I actually, for the most part, which is a rare occasion on this podcast, agree with large parts of what you're saying. But what I want to drill down on, Scarlett, is this idea that as a group of players, probably the only thing that Arsenal group fear, like Liverpool, for example, will come on to this. They fear long throw-ins, or they fear any kind of team showing any kind of attacking intent. We all have our own version of what a worst case scenario. We fear losing leads. But for Arsenal, there's a specific kind of, because it's been a familiar failing for them, of not scoring or not finishing off a game. So that's what I want to ask you is, why would it be different this season if in a few weeks' time you play, let's say, Brighton at home, and it's a scrappy draw because Arsenal don't take their chances from set pieces? How is that group going to block out the noise that will come, that's already there when you're winning every week, and will come even louder when there's a negative result?
I think we've been caught lacking in forward positions in the past couple of seasons. Like, I think that was one of the reasons why I found the recruitment last summer, not the one just gone, but the one before where we signed Sterling, so frustrating, because the noise coming out of Arsenal was that there was an understanding that there was a lack of X factor in the front part of the pitch. And so it's not like a foreign problem to us. I do think over the summer we've addressed that in quite a multifaceted and interesting way. So I'm less concerned about that combination of factors, meaning that things get really stale if we don't score. I think it's possible that in this current shake-up of players that they are a bit exhausted, there's not too much to turn to and change things with, and we get a 0-0. But I just don't see it being a kind of rot that will set in. And I also, you talk about set pieces, people talk about them as if it's almost a lottery, but it isn't a lottery because you create a kind of probability of scoring from those situations if you take them well. So obviously not every ball is going to drop for you, and there is an element of luck involved in things going as you want them to. But things will go as you want them to if you do them well. You can rely on set pieces in the same way that you can rely on goals from open play. You can't guarantee they're going to happen, but you can create circumstances in which they're likely to happen.
Okay, Tony Pulis, where does this leave Arsenal in the title race? Is it yours to lose now?
Well, friend of the podcast, Mum, and known Liverpool fan, did write in my birthday card, I think this might be your year. And she's never done that before. Unless she wrote that in my birthday card in 2004, and I'm too young to remember that.
Don't think you were an Arsenal fan then.
I was. We went to the Invincibles parade.
You don't even remember it.
I do. I got a flag. It's hanging up over there. Anyway, where does that leave us in the title race? I mean, unfortunately for the people preying on our downfall, it does sort of put us in a position where if already, and I know it's super early and I know things can change, but just based on the eye test about like where certain teams are and how competent we look, barring any major disruption or crisis, it leaves us in a position where we now have to take the initiative. Things have broken for us as they broke for Liverpool last season. City fell away, Arsenal were beset by injuries, and now we have this daylight. We need to ride this moment. I think it leaves us in a promising position, but with work to do to stay at the level that we know we're capable of. But if we stay at the level that I know we're capable of, I don't see other people coming and putting together something that is absolutely unbeatable to us.
Question for you. Would you have said that if you were addressing the Liverpool team just a few short weeks ago and it was us who were 5 points clear? Would you have said that to that group then?
No, because I think that the body of evidence was different. You were winning games in a really different way. And we had conversations about it where you did acknowledge that Liverpool weren't playing well, but obviously victory papers over serious cracks because it feels good.
That's the thing that now being on the other side of that, because none of our defeats have been more than the odd goal, just like none of our wins were by more than the odd goal. And that's the thing. When you're winning, hard to see all the negatives for what they are. And when you're losing, it's really hard to see any positives. But I think Liverpool at the moment are just a case in point about fine margins in this league. And that's what's gonna make the title race so fascinating.
The truth is, as you allude to, always something in between, isn't it? But I do think that the thing that we can't quantify, which we discussed earlier, is what the F is going on in these people's heads. You know, they aren't FIFA players. They don't have like a fixed set of attributes that will perform consistently in certain circumstances. And I think that is the most interesting thing about these ruptures. And City had something similar last season where suddenly the psyche just changes. And it's fascinating to be on the outside of. So I will make you talk about the GTEC right now. I could go on all day about Arsenal's title credentials. Apart from the long throws, which your manager seems to think aren't a fair way of scoring, what happened?
It's really interesting how the Palace defeat, we were poor, but actually second half we were really good on the XG and arguably deserved to win the game, according to chances created, and especially given when we get the equaliser. We spent the entire second half in their half of the pitch. Um, but it's got worse from there. And as I said on the other week, I was really willing to dismiss that week of games before the international break as like that is just a terrible week. And then it's carried on. And I think actually that's really deepened the sense of crisis. And for me, look, it's happened. I said to mum that obviously conceding the first goal is everything, especially when you're at a low ebb like we are. Weirdly, you're looking at your leaders like Virgil to be like, we are not conceding the first goal by hook or by crook. Doesn't matter if we don't do anything until half time, we're not conceding an early goal. But Virgil has been part of plenty of Liverpool teams that have had a propensity to leak an early goal. But that's such a toxic thought to have about my captain who has won everything there is to win, has been, you know, the best I've ever seen to do it at centre back for Liverpool, the best that even people that were alive a long time before me have ever seen. So that just tells you about where the mindset is at. For me, it's a lot less about events that happened on the pitch at the GTEC. We were just awful. We were as bad as we've been in this run. And the worst thing about it was how predictable it was. Like I'm sure you were sitting there waiting to sit back and enjoy the hate watch. It's getting worse and worse. And just like winning begets winning, losing begets losing, and crisis only deepens. So any hope that I had about the Palace result or that week before the international break being a blip is gone, really.
Right, Lola, I want to ask you a bit about your manager because he's come in for some criticism recently, which is no surprise because, you know, the press are going to come for you if you make yourself an easy target. Arteta's had his fair share over the years. What have you actually made of what Slot has been saying, particularly his comments about set pieces and where Liverpool can be vulnerable? I think he said after Brentford that Liverpool had no answer to opponents using long balls. And if I were a Liverpool fan, I'd be pretty frustrated because I'd be like, well, why don't you have an answer? And why are you telling everyone how to beat us?
Scarlett, I don't think it's wildly different from the types of things he was saying last season. In fact, when he joined Liverpool, a few Feyenoord players were interviewed and said that he had this uncanny habit of telling the players in the dressing room before the game exactly how the game was going to go, and that was seen as a really strong part of his managerial strategy. So to me, it's just an extension of that. It's an extension of that trait he has, where obviously he's got a really elite ability to analyze match situations. But, I'm not going to let him get away scot free because, yeah, it pisses me off. If he knows what the problem is, then why isn't he fixing it? Even if the fix is very short term, like against Brentford, you start Joe Gomez at right back and you say, okay, we're going to need to play some tall guys because we're going to have to defend some throw-ins. I really believe in the long-term thing of not making knee-jerk decisions. But I think going into that game when it was so obvious what Brentford were going to do, and he, you know, said it before the game. It's like, okay, so put a really short guy at left back on the back post and it's going to be a problem. So yeah, it's really frustrating, but I don't think it's wildly different from what he was like last season.
I've seen little whispers on the internet that Slot's contract may not be renewed, and you mentioned that you were thinking Jurgen might come back. So,
Well, Jurgen basically soft launched his comeback on Diary of a CEO, which, by the way, Stephen Bartlett is not a friend of the podcast, and we're not fans of Diary of a CEO. I couldn't really believe Jurgen had done it, but I think weirdly, Jurgen's demeanor around coming back when we won the league, at the time, I was like, this is weird. This is not what I was expecting from a guy who would have full closure about leaving the job. It was definitely a reaction of a guy who really thought, this is my victory. I want to be there. And look, people are going to rewrite, just like they rewrote Jurgen's legacy by saying that Slot had cooked him by winning the league in his first season and shown how rubbish he was. People are going to do the reverse to Slot this season and say that it was all Klopp's work that meant we won the league. I don't subscribe to any of that. The point is, I was very struck both by Jurgen's demeanor when he came back for all the title winning celebrations because he didn't seem that happy. He definitely had a bone to pick, especially about the Trent stuff. And then to go on Diary of a CEO, it really baffles me. Like, why would you, as a public figure, go on a podcast like that unless you had something you wanted to say? And then Bartlett explicitly asked him about returning to management, and he did a politician's answer, but he left it very, very open. So, then the Twitter journos run away with it, and Indy Kalia's reporting that the hierarchy are really concerned about Slot and that Klopp's waiting in the wings. I mean, right now, in the depths of a losing run, the idea of Jurgen coming and comforting me with a big laugh and some kind of like vaguely sexual innuendos in his press conference is deeply comforting. But it doesn't mean that it's right. And the Liverpool way is to back your manager. Although my 5 a.m. thoughts, when you're awake and your mind is racing, is we always back our manager because there's never been this level of upheaval before. But I think the owners probably do feel a bit peeved at all the money that they've spent because this would have been at Slot's insistence. They backed the manager and he's got the players that he wanted. He's got the cars in the garage. He's just not able to make them drive. Ian Graham, director of research, I spoke to him at the Kenny Dalglish premiere, and obviously you're dying to get a shred of insight from someone like that who knows so much. And I was like, tell me it's all going to be okay. And he was like, well, Liverpool have the best players. On the data, Liverpool have the best players. They signed the best players. He did say Slot signed too many attackers, and that's a problem. But I don't think that we were mental for getting excited about signing players like Isak and Wirtz. And I don't think that they're suddenly bad players. So I do think that presents a major problem to Slot, a major, major, major problem, because he has the best players. And yet right now he cannot get a tune out of them. But for now and forever, I back the manager.
okay, now Lola, tell me, do you still think you're going to win the league?
I think we can, yeah. I think this season is really weird. I think this season is it's really early, Scarlett, for it to be sewn up in this way. And there's already been a huge swing from Liverpool being 5 points ahead. So why not? We've been terrible. We've lost 4 in a row. It's unheard of. But this season, to me, just has the feel of something that hasn't properly got going yet. And I think there are some big shots around the corner. So why not? Right, Scarlett, it's going to be a long season if I keep having to get on the therapy couch and unload about Liverpool each week. God, I miss winning football matches. But we're going to look ahead to the League Cup, which is now high, high up on my priority list. You've got Brighton on Wednesday evening. Is that at the Emirates?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a nightmare for me getting home tomorrow. Will anyone be going to that game? No, they're usually pretty thinly attended, your League Cup home ties.
I'll be going to the game.
Nice, nice. Well, we've got Palace for the 3rd time this season, our bogey team, and they've already lit the touch paper by posting a picture of Gay being ready for Anfield. It's just so petty. But whatever. Look, what are you looking for from tomorrow night, Scarlett?
Well, I imagine apart from both of us wanting to win, we'll probably be wanting slightly different things. I want to see the new players. I want to see the B team. because there's people who, Miles has not played that much football. Ethan's not played that much football. We had a Hincapié cameo at the end of the game, and I love him already. But yeah, I don't want to see any of the big players anywhere near that starting lineup. I want to see Marino up front, and I want to see some players who I haven't got a proper look at. I'm sure Kepa will start in goal. I think it's one game away from the quarterfinal. Am I right? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So look, we actually do often struggle against Brighton at home. I think it's a game we should win, but I also think it's a game we should be heavily rotating in. I just want there to be an awareness in the back of our mind that if you don't get a result in this game, no, it's not going to be a disaster, but actually to keep the train running, like go low impact, different players, rest people, but keep the train running because you want the momentum and you want to feel like you're progressing. Arsenal and the League Cup, historically, I think we've been fairly successful in the competition, but they've never won it since I've been a fan. But it feels like, something that people like Jamie O'Hara will be thinking we should be winning it because we should be so lucky to dismiss a trophy. And to some extent, I think that's true. I think the team who wins the League Cup is often the best team in the leagues, apart from Newcastle. I'd like to be in the mix. I'd like to win this game, but if we don't win, I won't be gutted. I'd like to be surprised by some of the players who don't play often because I think people have talked a lot about our big squad, but it's quite clear that there's a trusted 11. And it would be nice if there were some people who could emerge as candidates to relieve some of that burden. Lola, like I said earlier, I think we might be slightly gunning for different things this week. I imagine you'll be feeling very different about this competition now than maybe you were at the start of the season. You won it in Klopp's last season. Do you see this as your best chance of silverware? I'm joking. Or am I?
Ridiculous question. Scarlett, to be honest, I'm not silverware shy like you are. Like anything, any trip to Wembley is a privilege. Any opportunity to win silverware is a privilege. And I felt like that last season, even when we were way ahead in the league, felt like that in Klopp's last season when at one stage we were on for the quadruple. Like it's my fundamental belief, and I say this all the time, that winning trophies is something that leads to winning more trophies. There's been talk, actually, friend of the podcast, Rob Gutman, shared what he thought his starting lineup should be for this game. And it was a heavily, heavily rotated lineup featuring Eddie Woodburn, our third choice keeper, because obviously Alisson's injured and Mamadashvili has been playing. I don't really mind, I don't mind if Woodman starts, but I did mind about some of his other suggestions for players that might play. I think Calvin Ramsey was one of the names mentioned. Do you remember who he is, Scarlett? So he's the last remaining survivor from that ill-fated transfer window in the summer of 2022, where we signed Fabio Carvalho, Darwin Núñez, Calvin Ramsey, and Arthur Melo. So he's still at the club, has been really unlucky with injuries. But yeah, I actually saw something. I thought I'd been pranked when I saw something about how he was apparently a Trent regen. I thought it was this like spoof account called Anfield Papers, but it was real. All of which to say, sorry, Rob, I don't agree with you. I think we need to play a strong team because, frankly, we need to fucking win a football match. We fucking need to win a football match. And I'm swearing not gratuitously here because of how much Liverpool need to fucking win a football match. Like, I don't care who plays. I don't care if the captain plays, if Mo Salah plays. In fact, I would say, I know this feels reactive, but go back to the old boys, play Robertson at left back, play Van Dijk, play Salah, play McAllister, play all the lads and tell them you've dug us into a hole, go and get us out of it and go and win this game. So I want to see a win and I don't really care how it comes, because another thing that Rob said was that this season has shown that it's not like other crisis points where you really need to like throw out the whole thing to get to something good. We have the raw ingredients. We just need to put them together in the right way. So a win any which way tomorrow is what I'm looking for.
Fighting talk, Lola. Speaking of fighting, I really quickly want to get your opinion on this situation that I'm sure you've been trying to ignore because you don't want to go on Football Twitter at the moment. But fear not, I've got the receipts for you. So Hand of Arsenal, who we've discussed at length on this podcast during the transfer window, is an Arsenal in the know account who's actually been pretty pretty reliable and collabed with David Ornstein and Fabrizio Romano over the summers. Anyway, this person, whoever they are, people have become so irritated by the tenor of the conversation around set pieces and Arsenal ruining the game, which, for what it's worth, I think is like, I mean, as an Arsenal fan, it's going so well. Why are you getting drawn into this? Why are you getting drawn into what other people are saying? Who cares, for example, if Jamie O'Hara thinks Arteta's a top 10 manager? Anyway, Hand of Arsenal has dug up a bunch of official Liverpool tweets, Klopp quotes, ESPN articles praising Liverpool for being good at set pieces in recent years. I think I saw one about Trent taking his quick corner in 1920, Liverpool being really good from set pieces. Obviously, Match of the Day released that league table without set piece goals. What do you make of the conversation around set pieces at the moment? And do you think Arsenal are ruining the game?
It's a two-parted answer this for me. The first thing is when you're at the top of the league, as I've learned, Scarlett, and as you know, you're learning now, is you're there to be shot at, and people are always, always, always going to pick holes in the way that you're winning. When it was Guardiola, it was boring because it was tiki-taka. When it was City in the treble year, they were over-reliant on Haaland. For us this last year, I'm pretty sure they said we were boring. I'm pretty sure they said we were over-reliant on Salah. So the first part of that answer is it comes with the territory, and people will always do it because you're there to be shot at. Are Arsenal ruining the game? No. Do Arsenal play shit football? Yes. I've watched Arsenal loads. They're really boring to watch. And I think that's fine. Arteta has made a decision about how he wants to win football matches. And as of right now, it hasn't paid off yet. If they go and win the league, it has. But I look back to the Arsenal team that emerged in 22-23 and fell short, that played brilliant football, exciting football. And I am just a bit like confused about where that's gone, because I don't see that from Arsenal anymore. And I do think that the time wasting and the NFL style set pieces of taking an age over it, like I don't enjoy that as a football purist. In fact, for all that it's going terribly wrong at the moment, and this is what I come back to about crisis and how you feel in a crisis, Liverpool are top of the Premier League for open play chances created. So we're doing something right. But yeah, Arsenal aren't ruining the game, but I definitely don't enjoy Arteta's brand of football, I'm afraid.
Friend of the podcast, Jake, said that Joe Gomez's long throws were too loopy.
Well, we actually were advertising for a set piece coach on LinkedIn over the summer, so maybe Jakey would like to throw in an application.
Didn't you have a specialist throw-in coach at one stage?
There was a consultant. He wasn't a throw-in coach. Right. Look, Scarlett, we're going to have to wrap up because we've both got places to be. But I want to ask you, what surprised you this weekend?
You're not going to like it, Lola, and you might not even believe me, but Liverpool losing again and again surprises me. I talked about it feeling like less of a big deal, and that is true because I think you adjust to your new reality. But you were buoyed after you came back from the Kenny Dalglish premiere because you were saying that Liverpool have the best players, and like semantics about players being better than each other aside, Liverpool have really good players. So I must say, if you asked me how I thought this season was going to go at the beginning, I could not have anticipated a run like this from Liverpool. I could still see Arsenal winning the league in that reality, by the way, where it's really, really close, and it may yet be really close. But I have been surprised about the continued capitulation.
Yeah, so have I. And I think if we go back to that conversation about Slot, 4 Premier League defeats in a row is appalling. And I don't say this lightly because we had slumps under Klopp. We had bad seasons, we had bad runs of form, but we never lost 4 Premier League games in a row. And I think that's appalling, but that actually comes back to what surprises me. And what surprises me is how easy it is to lose. Once you start losing games, you find ways to lose football matches. Just like you find ways to win football matches, you find ways to lose football matches. And I can go back, as I was saying before, to every single one of these games and isolate to you moments where things could have gone differently. For example, I really don't think it was a penalty to put Brentford 3-1 up. Granted, there are lots of other ways that they could have scored, but it really wasn't a penalty. He doesn't make
I don't
contact.
think that's true. I don't think that's true.
So anyway, look, that's what surprises me is, and this is something that you should keep in mind, is you never know. You can snap out of the winning habit all too easily. And I do blame one man. Do you want to know the man that I blame?
Who do you blame, Lola?
Hugo Ekitike, because he's the one that brought the luck crashing down on us so spectacularly with that crazy cameo against Southampton where he scores the winner. He gets a yellow card, which wasn't a yellow card, scores the winner, takes his shirt off, does the Messi celebration, and got sent off, and that was it. All the good luck was gone. So sorry, Hugo, it's all your fault.
Right.
Okie dokie, we are going to wrap things up there. Thank you very, very much for listening. Thank you so much for your continued support. We look forward to touching base with you later on this week. And I, for one, just desperately hope that I'm talking to you after a win next time. Thanks very much, guys. See you next week. Bye bye.
Bye bye.